Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 123 of Crunch Time. I'm going to be your host for today's episode. I am Tanner Dislin, and as always, I am joined by Sam Gotzi. Sam, how are we doing today? The episode before conference tournaments, the last episode before Selection Sunday, because next time when we log on, next episode we release after this one, we will have a bracket.
Yeah, man. The most exciting time of the year. Conference tourneys going on. Some concluded already, but it's the best time of year. College basketball all day, every day. Coming down to the wire, bursts on the line. It's the best time of the year, and just the best, man.
Absolutely. Off the top of my head, I know Drake has already punched their ticket. I believe Longwood and Morehead State have already punched their tickets, and I'm sure there are even more. I mean, the Sun Belt Championship right now is a 23-point game with a minute and a half left, so James Madison will punch their ticket as well. The team that started the year with an upset over Michigan State, if you remember, so that comes full circle for the Dukes. So yeah, like you said, I mean, you're sitting at work at noon and there's a conference championship or semifinal game going on. It's the best, as we have said a million times over. But for the episode today, we've got, of course, college basketball. We had the women's conference tournaments for a lot of the major conferences happen last weekend. Some currently going on this weekend. Iowa men's basketball had a must-win game that didn't go so well, and today we were recording on Monday was the beginning of NFL free agency, the legal tampering period. So we got a lot of free agent moves there. So we'll talk about all of this and more in episode 123. But of course, before we get to any of that, we got to start with our winners and losers. So Sam, who's your winner of the episode?
Yeah, Tanner, I am going on the green for my winner this episode, and my man Scottie Scheffler put on an absolute show at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. He could not miss a single putt. In fact, he did not miss out of his 16 putts. He made all 16 within 15 feet on his way to winning by 5 shots at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. That's completely unheard of. So yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's like my short game, bro.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what I tell myself at least. But yeah, I mean that's pretty ridiculous. And for my winner of the episode, I'm gonna go with Dylan Horton because we all know who he is, right? So Dylan Horton is a Texans rookie defensive end, and during Week 12 during the season on November 22nd. He had announced that he was taking a leave from the team, and he cited a personal matter as the reason. Well, today he announced that the reason for his personal matter was because of stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. But today, on Monday, he announced that it is officially in remission. So
hell yeah,
he'll get back on the field here soon and try and ramp up and get ready for the season. But yeah, on Monday, while we were scrolling through looking for all these NFL updates, perhaps the best one of the day didn't come from a free agent signing or a trade. Came from Dylan Horton announcing his stage 4 cancer was in remission. So shout out Dylan Horton.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to him, man. That's huge.
Yeah. So hopefully everybody caught that. But of course, now we got to take a look at the losers. Sam, who is your loser of the episode?
Yeah, there were a lot of potential losers over the past week, but I think the one that brings it is the biggest loser of them all is, of course, the LSU Tigers and their leader, Kim Mulkey. If y'all didn't see this, what have you been doing with your life? But late in the SEC championship, I believe it was yesterday, between South Carolina and LSU, there was a little pushing and shoving, and it turned into a brawl. Benches cleared. All the bench players were actually ejected. So LSU had 5 players, and South Carolina had 6. Flau'jae Johnson was was the instigator, it seemed like. And so it all goes down, and we see a guy run onto the court and try to protect whoever he is protecting. Turns out it's Flage's brother, who actually got arrested shortly after. And so that happens. South Carolina wins SEC championship. After the game is where it even gets worse. Kim Mulkey. So it kind of started with Flage and Camilla Cardoso, if I'm saying that name right. And basically, it's a tiny point guard versus the center of South Carolina,
who's 6'7".
Who's 6'7". Kim Mulkey, after a game, goes, "I wish you would push Angel Reese. Don't push a kid. You 6'8". Don't push somebody that low. That was uncalled for, in my opinion. Let those two girls that were drawn, let them go out.
So I get it, it's just one of those, man, where I get what she's trying to say, because the initial instigation was from Flage Johnson, but then when Cardoso came over and pushed, that's when it kind of got pushed to the next level. And I get what she's trying to say. Like, the two guards are going at it, and basically pick on someone your own size. But there's no way on earth that she thought that was the best way to say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it was, hey, I wish you had pushed my other player. Like, what goes through her mind to say that? What I did not, and I think the basketball world is starting to finally see that Kim Mulkey is just not a good person.
Yeah,
I've seen backlash from this, and as it's deserved. I don't know where the backlash was for the a million other examples of her not being a great person, but yeah, now she's finally the world is opening their eyes, and you see that just the stark difference, because there was no apology anywhere in there about anything. No, we need to be better. No, she was just played the blame game. Their fault. And then you take a look at the other side, and what Dawn Staley said when she took the mic on their championship, like when she was talking to the crowd after they just won the SEC championship. The first thing out of her mouth was, "I want to apologize for the way we played." The first thing out of her mouth, was, "We need to be better. This isn't what our sport is about." And yeah, it could not have been handled more differently. And yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to say right now when one of these two schools is the defending champion in LSU, but seems like whenever South Carolina and LSU match up, I mean, LSU just can't beat them. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it was a really interesting scenario going on. And I mean, turns out you get arrested if you jump on the court and start pushing people. Also, did you see? It seemed like when he jumped over, he wanted all the smoke. Then he got up to Cardoso and saw she was 6'8", and he was like, "Oh, I made a mistake." And he started to back up, like, what a loser.
Yeah, and two of his friends, I assume, also jumped over, but they didn't get to court.
They didn't make it to the court. It was a pretty bad look for everything. When it was number 1 versus number 2 in the conference. I mean, number 1 versus number 8, like all eyes are on this game. And that's what we got down the stretch. And a side effect of all that is they're not going to be able to play in the first round.
Yeah,
everyone who got ejected. So, which Cardoso was one of them, and that's a starter right there for South Carolina. And then LSU, I think all of their starters stayed in. So like Van Lith and Reese and Flage, they none of them got ejected, but they only got 5 players, I believe, in their first game. So that'll be
crazy.
That'll be an interesting thing to watch. So for my loser, it's funny. For my loser, I was gonna say on court behavior, just as a general. And half of it was going to be in this LSU South Carolina game, and the other half was going to be our favorite, the Duke Blue Devils, because there was a pretty big game in Cameron Indoor this weekend between Duke and North Carolina. And North Carolina just came in and punched Duke in the mouth and of course won the game. And at the end, North Carolina, decided to run over and give the fans some jawing, a little bit of trash talk after winning. And Duke fans decided it was a good idea to then throw stuff on the court at the North Carolina players. the same school, by the way, that lost their minds when someone did something that has been in college basketball for as long as I've been alive and as long as everyone can remember. Um, and for someone who didn't even get injured, might I add. But yeah, the school that freaked out about that, then they turn around and immediately start throwing stuff on the court at their rivals. I mean, you just can't make it up. It was an absolute peak Duke moment of being one of the most unlikable programs in college basketball. You have that fan throwing stuff in North Carolina. You had John Shire apologizing to students for losing to North Carolina. I mean, is that not the most Coach K behavior you've ever
Yeah,
seen? Like,
honestly.
you know, I half expect, I half expect him to like apologize and like take ownership that was him that was throwing stuff on the field, and that he would request to speak to North Carolina's team to apologize or something. Just the most Coach K stuff in the world. To just Duke is so back, and then after all that, you get an awesome clip of Kyle Filipowski clearly tripping someone on UNC. So yeah, just an
Yeah.
absolutely hilarious twist of fate as the school that we need to be all about player safety. Fans don't belong on the court. Nothing belongs on the court unless we lose to our rival. Then water bottles and liquids that we throw and bags and food all belong on the court. And it only applies to when it's going against us. So
Yeah.
classic trash stuff from Duke. And turns out, yeah, they're so back. John Shire is just as beginning to look just as unlikable as Coach K. So all's right with college basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. And it even started before the game, Tanner. We saw the Cameron Crazies yelling, "I want to kill you," to RJ Davis during pregame warmups. RJ Davis went absolutely crazy. So God love to see that. But yeah, Kyle Filipowski's probably going to end up in the Duke Hall of Fame for being one of the most hated players in college basketball. That's the Duke way. I mean, Christian Leitner, let's see, Grayson Allen. Even JJ Redick, when he was playing there, he was very much hated. So it just fits him. He's fitting into his program.
The Duke Whites. The Duke Whites are so unlikable constantly. But also speaking of Whites, we also got to shout out Cormac Ryan in that game for North Carolina. Went absolutely off. I believe he had 31 or something like that, and 6 threes, I want to say.
Yeah.
Just completely put Duke to bed. So yeah, great showing from Cormac Ryan and UNC, and really poor showing once again from the Duke faithful. But you ready to get into some free agency talk, Sam?
Yeah, let's do it.
Today, of course, as we said earlier, was the first day of NFL free agency. I guess technically it might have been last night when the clock struck midnight Eastern or something, because we do have a few in here that happened before today, and we will start with those. A couple of free agent quarterbacks that were, their spot was in limbo here. We'll start with Russell Wilson, of course, being released by the Broncos. We talked about that last episode. He's going to Pittsburgh. He signed a 1-year deal with the Steelers for like $1 million for basically quarterback vet minimum. And he's going to compete with Kenny Pickett for the job, Sam.
Is he? Is he really? I mean, yeah, if it's kind of a steal because everyone knows he has that big buyout from the Broncos. I had another quarterback I thought the Steelers were going to go with.
I agree with you.
So I definitely fit the Mike Tomlin. I think Mike Tomlin and Russell Wilson aren't going to work out. Because the Steelers have been doing it the Steeler way since forever, basically, and that's why they're consistently mid. But I mean, they obviously got better, but it's the off the field stuff with. Also, can we set the facts straight? Russell Wilson was not bad.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot too of Russell Wilson washed. Is he Seahawks Russell Wilson is.
No.
Of course not. No one's saying he is. But he did not play bad football last year. And there seems to be some sort of, I don't know, I guess revisionist history over the past year that
Yeah.
because the Broncos, put together a pretty, uh, pretty, words are hard. My God. The Broncos put together a good second half and were at one point the hottest team in the NFL, largely because of Russell Wilson,
Yeah.
who was playing good football.
I mean, yeah, his stats, I mentioned it last episode, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions for 3,000 yards. That's a good season, especially when your offense wasn't anything to be proud of. But do they get better? Yes, but I don't think it's gonna pan out. Just due to the weirdness of Mr. Unlimited.
Yeah, and I mean, just on top of that, the Broncos had a negative running game last year. Who would you rather have catching passes, Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, or Deontay Johnson and George Pickens?
Yeah.
I'm pretty comfortably taking Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. And you get Najee Harris and Jalen Warren being an absolute weapon out of the backfield in the passing game as well. I do think it's a good fit. I do believe they brought Russell Wilson in with the intention of competing with Kenny Pickett. I don't think it will be long before Russell Wilson is starting if he doesn't win it outright in the preseason. But I don't know. I just think it makes sense. Teams struggling for good quarterback play. You got a veteran that you signed for basically nothing. It makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other quarterback that came off the board before Monday was Baker Mayfield. He signed a 3-year, $100 million extension with the Bucs, of which I believe was 50 is guaranteed, if not more. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the Bucs keep Baker, who of course won the NFC South and won the playoff game last year.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big fan of Baker Mayfield. I think he got absolutely screwed with the situation in Cleveland. I like it a lot. I don't think he's not gonna wow you, but he's gonna be consistently good. That's what we saw from him last year, and look where it led to a not a good, I'd say below average Bucks team. And look what happened. Baker, I mean, I assume Mike Evans had at least some part in this decision because we all know with
him to that big deal
with Russell Wilson and who we'll talk about later. I mean, I like it. It's obviously a good fit. We saw it work last year. Run it back. Why not?
Yeah, it's a good fit, like you said, and I totally agree with you on the Mike Evans thing. I'm sure Mike Evans, before signing his deal, had some sort of assurance that either Baker or someone else that he would approve of was playing quarterback. And I think the most telling thing is pretty shortly after it was announced, a lot of Bucs players went to social media, offensive linemen, receivers, even defensive players went to Twitter to show their approval of the Baker Mayfield or re-signing Baker Mayfield. So definitely a good thing over in Tampa Bay. I think it works for all parties. There's only one slight issue though, Sam. That division I think just got a little bit harder because the big fish at the quarterback position, the one who seemed to be, the first domino to fall was Kirk Cousins. And for the first time since 2018, in 6 years, the Minnesota Vikings will need to find a quarterback because Kirk Cousins is going to the Falcons.
Yeah. This I get why. I mean, Desmond Ridder was clearly not the answer in Atlanta. It just he's not a young quarterback.
36.
He's not really gonna he's not a game changer, in my opinion. And they paid a crap load of money to keep him. They're not in win mode now. At least I don't think so. But it's definitely an upgrade. So we'll see. I don't. It's gonna be interesting how they play in the future with the money hit Kirk Cousins is taking because you do got uh guys like Bijan that is probably going to run out within his rookie deal's probably up in the next 5 years, and Kyle Pitts is probably as well. Um, so it's interesting. I think they might have overpaid a little bit. But I mean, it's always an upgrade when you don't have to start Desmond Ritter. So
Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple things here. I mean, I personally have thought Atlanta was a good fit all the way going back to before the season, right? I believe I can't remember if I've said it on the podcast, but I know I've said it before. That I think Atlanta would make a run at Kirk Cousins. Obviously, they did. I do think that roster is quite good, and and a lot of people don't realize how good it is because Desmond Ritter played terrible football for them for majority of the season. The cap situation right now, I think, is okay because as you said, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, all on rookie deals. That won't last forever, as you said, and this Kirk Cousins deal is 4 years. So at least Bijan you'll have to pay in 4 years if you want to keep him, but Kyle Pitts before then, Drake London before then. So that'll be interesting to see, as you said, how they handle all of that. Uh, but I think they weren't in win now mode until today. I mean, there's no possible way you can sign Kirk Cousins for 4 years, 180 million, and then like not be in win now mode. But I agree with you. I don't think it wasn't like we got to win now until literally 6 hours ago when this deal went through. So yeah, I mean, shout out Kirk Cousins in his age 36 season, coming off of a completely torn Achilles. He
yeah, we
gets
didn't even mention that
yeah,
the torn
he's
Achilles.
coming off a major injury, and he gets 4 years, 180 million in his age 36 season. Again, the professional bag getter does it once again. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting because for the first time in 6 years, Kirk Cousins is going to be or Minnesota is going to need a quarterback with the departure of Kirk Cousins. So I mean, it's definitely exciting for the fan base because it's a spot we hadn't been in for a while. But when you have to, when you look back at the Kirk Cousins era, two things can absolutely be true, and I believe they're true, and I encourage all Vikings fans to believe they're true. It was the right move at the time. Kirk Cousins is a very good quarterback, and the way his dedication, his preparation, his play as a Minnesota Viking is one of the better quarterbacks in franchise history. And there is absolutely no denying that, but it didn't work, and that's okay. Like it for all of these things I'm saying to be true, for him to be a one of the better quarterbacks in franchise history, for it to make sense at the time, it doesn't need to work, and it didn't, and that's okay. He was seen as the missing piece to a championship roster. The year before that, the Vikings had made it to the NFC title game where they got their doors blown out by Philly in a game which they scored 7 points. They thought Kirk Cousins would be the answer to bolster that offense, go out and win a damn Super Bowl. And they didn't even come close. Any Vikings fan out there who thinks that this is a bad day for the franchise because they needed to go out and re-sign Kirk Cousins, you're an idiot. Respectfully, you are an idiot because it didn't work and they didn't even come close. I see so many idiots out there talking about how, when people say Kirk Cousins, we can't handle the cap hit, and then they go, Patrick Mahomes won 2 Super Bowls with his cap hit. If you compare Kirk Cousins to Patrick Mahomes again, I will punch you in the face because those things are not even remotely the same. Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins. He's a good quarterback. Patrick Mahomes is one of the best to ever do it, if not the best to ever do it. Those things are not the same. And you can win Super Bowls with the best to ever do it with a crazy cap hit. You can't win Super Bowls with Kirk Cousins with a crazy cap hit. It's just how it works. And with the state of your defense, the state of your roster, you cannot have Kirk Cousins but taking up that much cap hit. It is that simple and that easy. And Yeah, I mean, I love Kirk Cousins. I believe he comes back to Minnesota when I think Atlanta plays Minnesota this year in Minnesota. When he comes back, I hope he gets a huge standing ovation. He deserves it for everything he gave to the city. It was awesome, and I love Kirk Cousins. It just didn't make sense to bring him back, and I think this was a good outcome for the Vikings. I know that was a lot, but it's just stuff I got to get off my chest.
Yeah.
So that was the majority of the quarterback market right now. I think Gardner Minshew also uh, came off the market with, and he signed with the Raiders. But the next big fish to fall was Saquon Barkley, probably the best running back on the market, Sam, and he goes to a division rival. He leaves the Giants and signs with the Eagles for 3 years, 37.75 million.
Yeah. I mean, I love this if you're an Eagles fan. Rest of division, I'm a little worried. It's a good pickup, man. They finally have a top tier running back. And I'm really glad Saquon is finally out of that garbage organization, the Giants. He was just wasting his talent there. And he wasn't going to get bagged because they paid Daniel Jones $1 billion to be one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. So great pickup for the Eagles. I will say, it's gonna be interesting seeing Saquon uh with, let's be honest, not the Jason Kelsey retired. He's gone. And I personally think he played a bigger role in that rushing attack of the Eagles than people realize. So it'll be interesting how that works out. Obviously, comparing DeAndre Swift and Saquon can literally do anything he wants. With, I mean, he is kicking ass with the Giants, so it's definitely still an upgrade for him. But if you're an Eagles fan, you gotta be ecstatic. If you're a divisional fan, it's scary, very very scary.
Yeah, and I think what one of the main complaints from Eagles fans was losing the run game and having Jalen Hurts step back and pass too many times. And
Mm-hmm.
when you had that offensive line, when you had DeAndre Swift, who started off the season hot and kind of fell off. Yeah, I mean this is the best back that the Eagles have had in a very long time, probably since Shady McCoy. Um, and with as you said, kind of a shifting offensive line, it's going to be interesting, as you said, how they replace Jason Kelsey. But 4/5 of that offensive line were starters on a really damn good offensive line for multiple years now. So and in a team that has been pretty scary with the run game over the past few years. So yeah, it seems like a perfect fit for Saquon. Of course, Pennsylvania guy, Penn State guy, homecoming. It all makes sense. But yeah, I can see why division teams might not be too happy with it. And if you're a Giants fan, you just got to be sick, right? That is just brutal. But didn't last too long though, because the Giants went out and they traded for Brian Burns and signed him to a big time deal. So at least you got a pretty good young pass rusher, and that's worth mentioning. The Giants bolstering that defense, but also we got to talk about the Carolina Panthers, who during the trade deadline of the 2022 season were offered by the Rams a second round pick in 23 and then a first round pick in 24 and 25. And the Panthers turned that down for exactly one more year of Brian Burns, to which they then traded to the Giants for a second round pick and a fifth round pick.
Yeah, that's brutal.
That's not
Not
great.
great.
That is not great. And shows why some organizations are better than others. Let's just say that. So that's a real tough look for Carolina. And yeah, big time pass rusher goes over to New York to maybe help the pain of losing Saquon Barkley. But I guess the only other deals worth mentioning off the top of my head, I got, Christian Wilkins, the big time defensive tackle. He goes to Las Vegas to be a Raider. That one was a little confusing to me, Sam. I don't know about you. Um, Confusing, but he got a bag. So shout out Christian Wilkins. Also Tony Pollard, the Cowboys running back who was given primary back roles and was a little underwhelming this year. He's going to the Titans. You gonna miss TP or not really?
Not really. I think he's a split back. We saw him take over the main carries, and he just wasn't the same player. So not real. I mean, no.
Yeah, I get you. He, at least based on his performance last year, very replaceable. And there's a guy. Oh, somebody fell in this track and field. Oh, tough look for him. But there's a name out there like a Derrick Henry who might make a lot of sense for Dallas. So we'll see how that goes. But that's kind of our NFL talk. Those were the main deals that came through, the big ones at least, and of course the big fish being Kirk Cousins. And I mean, I would argue an exciting time to be a Vikings fan. Although some people might think it's a dark day, but I can assure you that it was for the best. But moving on, we did have a pretty damn good weekend of basketball, Sam. Of course, we will start with a pretty big weekend for our Iowa Hawkeyes basketball teams. We'll start on the good side of things because the women's team tipped off on Friday because they got that double bye in the Big Ten Women's Championship, took down Penn State with ease. On Saturday, took down Michigan with ease. And then on Sunday, took on Nebraska for the Big Ten Championship and put together a gutsy come-from-behind win in overtime. So Iowa women's now make it a three-peat with Big Ten tournament championships.
Yeah. Nebraska played their ass off, man. I gotta give credit where credit is due. They just collapsed in the last 2 minutes, 30 seconds. As much love as we give Caitlin Clark, the real game changer was the defense of Gabby Marshall, making some huge blocks, huge steals down the stretch in this one. I mean, on ESPN, you know how they have the graph of percentage of winning with 2 minutes, 30 seconds left. Iowa had a 1% chance of winning. And Nebraska just collapsed, man. Caitlin Clark, we all saw how she kind of started the game terrible. Probably the worst performance I've ever seen from Caitlin Clark, which was very concerning. I think she had 4 points at half. And then she woke up and dropped 30 in second half and overtime. I think what's the craziest part about this team is just even though Caitlin Clark was shooting miserably, you never felt you were out of this. Caitlin just needed to start hitting some shots, and we're back in it. It never felt out of reach at any point. Guys, shout out Hannah Stolke. She kind of picked up the slack when Caitlin wasn't playing well. Caitlin was finding her in unbelievable ways. Kate Martin, another big time playmaker in that first half, and Gabby Marshall, 3-and-D kind of player for the Hawks. It was impressive, man. What a great comeback. Not many teams are doing that, honestly. We had it was just an impressive comeback. And obviously Caitlin Clark's gonna get the love, but it really came down to the defense of Gabby Marshall. And I think people need to give her more credit because she made the two biggest plays of the game, and it's not even close.
Absolutely. A lot of things had to go well for this comeback. As you said, number one, you needed the supporting cast to step up when Caitlin Clark played the absolute worst half of basketball, as you said, we have ever seen. 0 for 9 from 3, 4 points at half was terrible. I mean, turnovers, missed shots, all of the above. And when Nebraska jumped out to their lead, so you needed the supporting cast to keep it within arm's length, which majority thanks to Hannah Stolke, who ended the game with 25, and Kate Martin, who ended the game with 13, and then of course Sydney Folter, who was played out of her mind this whole tournament.
All tourney.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. She is coming off the bench the entire year, picked up huge slack for the Hawks when Molly Davis went down in that senior day game.
Big time minutes. She was in double figures herself with 11 points and also 11 boards. So a double for a Folter. But so you needed all of that to happen. Then you needed Caitlin Clark to wake up, which she absolutely did. And when in the clutchest moments, she had a big time threes down the stretch, and the one that stands out in overtime, Iowa down 1, under a minute left. She hits a big time step back 3, tough shot. Also to send it to overtime, big time layup within a minute left to tie the game. But the defensive possessions, the block from Gabby Marshall, the tip balls from Gabby Marshall, even the defensive possession to send it to overtime. If you remember, Nebraska had the ball with around 20 seconds left at the end of regulation, and it was a great team defensive effort on that side of the floor to get that stop and send it to overtime. A lot of things had to happen, and they did. And I would argue the single biggest bucket of the game came from Kate Martin, because it was when Iowa was down 8 with under 3 minutes left in regulation, and she hit a big time corner 3 to bring it within 5. And then I believe Caitlin hit Hannah Stolke on a rim run on a fast break that brought it within 3, and then that's when we knew it was a chance to come back from that. Yeah. So if Kate Martin misses that 3, Nebraska rebounds up 8, they can take their time. We're in a real tough spot. So the biggest shot of the game goes to Kate Martin, and not a lot of people will give her the credit for that she deserves. But looking on the other side of things, I do have to shout out someone who I think at times and most of the game was the best player on the floor, and that's Alexis Markowski, the center for Nebraska.
Yeah,
she was magnificent in this game. 23 and 13. She did it from all over the place on the floor. She could shoot threes. I mean, gave Hannah Stolke fits. She got her in foul trouble. We had to go a little O'Grady Stolke offense defense, which obviously is something that that Lisa Bluter doesn't want to do, and that was all that was due to the great play of Markowski. Natalie Potts, the Big Ten freshman of the year, she got 21 herself. I mean, I've seen a lot of love to Markowski, not a lot to Potts, who had 21. And Chess Shelley, 16 points, 13 assists. Like, this Nebraska team is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And they, as you said, if I'm a Nebraska fan, I'm pretty sick to my stomach just because I don't know how they could have played a better game. They did everything they needed to do. Just at the end, was a better team, and Caitlin Clark hit some insane shots that she probably shouldn't have. And Kate Martin came up clutch, and Gabby Marshall came up clutch, and that's how we got here. But Nebraska, I mean, I don't know how you can't be any prouder of the way the team played, how they got there, and then how they played in the championship game. I mean, it was really great basketball game, and that's not important. We don't lose sight of that. After the jubilation of that win, the Iowa men had a absolute must-win game for their tournament hopes at home against Illinois. Carver was sold out. Did look like there was a decent amount of Illinois fans there, but still, it was very loud for Carver. I mean, it was a loud environment, very loud for Carver. And the Iowa basketball team.
Well, Carver for men's games. Let's clarify that. there was no Travis Scott in attendance, so unfortunately.
And I think the score at one point was like 25-9.
Yeah. I think they started out the game 16-2 run for the Illini. Started the game 0 for 9, I want to say. Yeah, just absolutely brutal.
Started the game 0 for 9. And you just can't do that. You must win games with your season on the line, especially when you laid an egg against Michigan at home, the worst team in the Big Ten by far. You know, you played yourself into this spot, and you absolutely had to have it. And you played like crap. There was there was no effort from the seniors. I mean, Tony Perkins was terrible at every position. Was terrible. If he could make a damn layup, Iowa would have cut it to one with double digit ish minutes left in the second half. But no, we had to go for the highlight slam and try and absorb the contact and missed the dunk, missed the layup, and I believe it led to a three on the other end by Terrence Shannon. Really frustrating stuff. The senior class was absolutely awful all year long. We talked about it. Ben Krikke gave us nothing in this game. Tony Perkins was a liability in this game. Patrick McCaffrey, what do you even do on the basketball court? The senior class was absolutely awful.
He led the seniors.
What's that?
In points. He did lead the seniors in points with a stellar 5.
Who did?
Patrick McCaffrey.
Shout out, Pat. I wasn't familiar with your game.
That's how bad it was. They combined for 9 points. The 3 seniors. Krikke is our center. He had 1 rebound. Tony Perkins could play 0 defense without fouling. Just absolutely abysmal. The only 2 guys that it really came down to 2. Owen Freeman had a good game. Brock Harding probably surprised me the most in this one. Yet Friend doesn't want to play him when he's playing well. So that's a conversation for another day. But we just played through Peyton Sanford and Josh Dix, and that's just not gonna go well against this Illinois team. I mean, Terrence Shannon Jr. Could do whatever he wanted to. It's just absolutely embarrassing, especially when Patrick McCaffrey comes out and says on his expectations for the crowd on Sunday. I would hope it's pretty good, but I don't know. Our crowds have been pretty bad most of the year, with the exception of a couple games. So who knows? I hope it's good. So to be fair, I am perfectly fine calling out the fan base for not showing up. But you got to hold up your end of the bargain. They played absolutely terrible. Patrick McCaffrey has played terrible all year. The fact he gets any minutes is absolutely absurd. I know the reason is his last name and daddy's coach, but absolutely embarrassing. This could have been a huge fire starter for this Iowa basketball team going into tourney. Like you said, we're right on the verge of a bubble, and that did not help our case. Again, need a big run in the Big Ten tournament, and let's be honest here, that's probably not going to happen.
Probably not going to happen, and that's they play themselves in a spot to where a deep run without a conference championship might not even do it, and it's a shame. It is a real shame. You nailed it to call out the fans, which we agree. Good. The fans haven't been there. I get it. It's frustrating to see all these great atmospheres, and then in Carver it's not for men's games. I get it, but after calling out the fans, you simply cannot do what you did. I can't get over the fact how the worst senior class in the Big Ten just continues to let this team down. Brock Harding was an absolute spark in the first half. Where was he in the second half?
Yeah.
On the bench, so Tony Perkins can miss layups and miss dunks, and so Pat McCaffrey can do absolutely nothing. So a real frustrating display from Fran, I think, who I was really harsh on early because the team wasn't playing well. His rotations I didn't think were great. I thought he adapted well. The team was playing better, and then to come out and I didn't like his rotations this game at all. The team just simply put wasn't ready to play. I think that can reflect coaching a little bit, and not great all around. Really, really frustrating stuff. Don't really know where you go from here. You just got to win the tournament and then you're in, I guess. But, that's a tall task now that when you look in the bracket, after you lost this game, you fall to the 7 seed. You got to play Ohio State in that 7-10 matchup. This is Ohio State team that is red hot, Sam. I don't know if you've seen their last couple games. They beat the crap out of Rutgers, beat the crap out of Michigan, took down a good Nebraska team, right? The number 3 team and number 3 seed in the Big Ten, won at Michigan State. They lost to a surging Minnesota, who might be the hottest team in the Big Ten, number 2 being Ohio State. And then before that, they beat Purdue. So this team is hot, and of course you got to play them now. If you won, you would have taken the 5 seed, and you would have played the winner of the first 4 game. But no, of course not. Why would that happen? Really, really aggravating effort, real aggravating coaching, real aggravating everything from the men's team, especially after coming off the high of the women's team. Seemed like they were almost entitled at one point, and it just really bothers me. But uh, can't win them all, I guess. And for Iowa basketball, can't win many. But that brings us to conference tournaments. I know last week we talked about who we think are going to win each one. Now we actually have the brackets for each and every one. So we're just going to go through, talk about some of the potential matchups, what we got our eyes on, and what games should you be watching this weekend when all of these are going on. So we'll start on the Big Ten because we just talked about them and the disappointing performance from Iowa. Sam, looking at this Big Ten bracket, does anything jump out at you as one you got to lick your chops at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this potential of Indiana and Nebraska matchup in the third round. I think that could be very interesting. We've seen Indiana kind of get a spark late in the season, and Nebraska, who kind of was projected to kind of be a mid team in Big Ten, kind of lit a spark this season. Fred Hoiberg finally getting it going in Nebraska, it seems. So that's definitely one I'm looking at. But there's potential for some interesting matchups across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking at the top 4, obviously you don't want to play Illinois, Purdue. So you're looking at that Northwestern or Nebraska. Nebraska, I'd argue, is probably the team you might want to play. In Indiana, we talked about how hot some of these teams are. Indiana coming off of a win at home against Michigan State. Talked about how hot Minnesota was. Well, Indiana beat them in Minneapolis the game before that, and then won in College Park, Maryland as well. So they're winners of 4 straight. So they're coming in hot themselves. I kind of like that matchup, as you said, a potential upset for Indiana and keep things moving. Talking about Ohio State, I think Iowa's in big trouble against Ohio State in that 7-10. And then that Illinois Ohio State, I think, could be a pretty good game too. Maybe one that not many people have their eyes on. But of course, an Illinois Purdue matchup in the finals would probably result in the most nail biting game, but as chalky as it is, and really how not good the Big Ten is from top to bottom this year. But we'll move on and talk about a conference that is good from top to bottom, and dare we say the best top to bottom, the Big 12, because this conference, as you know, is wow. So looking at this bracket, anything stand out to you as one you got to lick your chops at?
Honestly, all of these I'm licking chops because anything can happen in this tournament. But if I had to pick one, it's game 9. Iowa State could potentially be welcoming a former Cyclone in Tyrese Hunter with the Texas Longhorns. That would be electric with a chance to move on to semis. But like you said, best conference by far. It's not even particularly close. Anything can happen. I can see there's people saying Kansas State can make a deep run. Don't really believe that personally, but I mean, literally anything can happen. I don't know. One thing to mention in this tournament is we got some news very recently within the past hour. Hunter Dickinson and McCullough for Kansas is going to be out. So don't be shocked if we see an update or an upset with either West Virginia or Cincy, whoever comes out. Don't be surprised if we see an upset in that game 6 over Kansas. So it's going to be electric. All these games are must watches, but the potential matchup I'm looking at for sure is that Texas Iowa State game.
That's a good one. And you know what? I'm going to even say, how about before that? I mean, literally a first round, or I guess a second round, but the first game that these teams will be playing, Kansas State, Texas. I mean, that's a banger. in and of itself. Kansas State playing a little better ball down the stretch, beat Iowa State in the last game, right? Maybe that could be some momentum for the Wildcats. Then the potential of a Kansas Baylor, obviously that got taken down a little bit with the news of the Kansas injuries. But that, I mean, the 3 and the 6 Kansas Baylor. Oh my God, who doesn't love that? And of course, my team to watch out. I said it last week, BYU against Texas Tech. Texas Tech, another team playing good ball right now. That 5-4 of a potential BYU and Texas Tech, that would be an awesome game. And then, of course, we have the potential for a Houston-Iowa State championship, which would be electric. The first 2 games between these 2 teams did not disappoint, splitting them, each winning their home game. Matchups all around. This has got to be the most fun to talk about. Literally every game we can go on about how cool of a matchup it is. But those are the ones that stick out to us. And now we'll take a look at the ACC, Sam. You know, we talk about how these conferences were debating whether who's the second best, who's the best. For a long time, the ACC was the best. Not the case this year. But of course, with North Carolina's win over Duke that we talked about earlier, UNC locks up the 1 seed, Duke the 2. What's standing out to you in this bracket?
Yeah, I mean, I can go the easy route. North Carolina, Duke in the championship. Everyone's gonna love that, except some people, obviously. But the matchup, it's not one particular matchup I'm looking at. It's can Virginia score more than 40 points? Because that is the big question. Everyone knows how good Tony Bennett and the Cavs are on the defensive end. Can't say the same about the offense. So don't be surprised if we see a Clemson in that quarterfinals upset Virginia just by scoring maybe 50 points. Because God knows the Cavaliers are not going to score. I don't even. I mean, there's been games where it's almost unbearable to watch. And I'm all for a good defensive battle, but sometimes I need to see at least 50. Come on now.
I'm just giving a quick scan through their season. I'm at 5. It looks like 5. So they've scored in the 40s 5 times this season. And 1, 2, 3, 4 of their last 6 games they have scored in the 40s.
Hey.
Yeah, that is not great. And you took the words out of my mouth. We've talked about sleeper teams. Clemson is that team for me. Specifically, A, I think they're better than most people think.
Yeah.
And B, they get to play Virginia.
Yeah.
Top 4 draw is Virginia in all of this. You know, a team that, as we've mentioned, can really struggle to score the basketball. Another team, a team that made a run in the past that Sam called Virginia Tech. When this team gets hot, as we've seen in years past, we saw it against the game against Virginia. We talk about this Virginia's defense. Virginia Tech lit them up. They won that game by like 35 or something. So Virginia can get hot. Of course, again, being on that 8 slot, you got to go through UNC, the number 1 seed, to get there. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. Clemson versus Virginia. That's the big upset alert. Interesting that Pitt's on that 4 slot, another bubble team that's really trying to make sure they don't lose a bad one. Wake, I mean,
that'll be an interesting matchup. That 4-5 could be. I mean, both very much on the bubble right now. Wake Forest lost to Georgia Tech did hurt them a little bit, but so they need a big run, and a victory over Pitt would do wonders.
Absolutely. But if we keep moving, we'll go down south. We'll go to the SEC. Same question. Anything stand out here?
Yeah, I mean, the potential of this South Carolina Auburn matchup in the quarterfinals, I think, could be a very interesting game, underrated game. Nothing really enticing the first and second round. Another game is Florida, Alabama potentially in that quarterfinals. I think that is going to be Florida has been good. They had some upsets throughout the season. Kind of a sleeper team for me for the SEC tourney. Don't be surprised if the Gators make a run this year.
Yes, I like that a lot. Although they did end their season with a little bit of a hiccup. They lost at Vanderbilt. But before that, just the game before that, guess who they played, Sam? Alabama, and they
And they
beat
beat
them
that.
by 18. Yeah, and it wasn't as close as the score indicates. They were up at like 20s and 30s at one point. But that the game I was looking at was that Florida Alabama. Ole Miss Texas A&M. I think that's the most intriguing one to me in the second round, which is the two closest. Mississippi State LSU would be the two closest. But that 10-7, I think, is a good one. Chris Beard and company got off to the real hot start in the beginning of the season, kind of faded a little bit towards the end. But that Ole Miss Texas A&M game, I'm liking that in that second round. Then you hop into the quarterfinals. Winner got to take on Kentucky there. I mean, Kentucky coming off that win against Tennessee. Can that be the momentum to push the Wildcats forward? Auburn, a team that's not getting a lot of buzz. I mean, that's a good basketball team. And the South Carolina Auburn as a 5-4 would be a great game. But of course, the number 1 seed Tennessee, as we've talked about, the best team in the conference. But another conference, again, I think I said it when we were talking about winners. Just the most underrated conference, I think, is the SEC. I think you have a genuine argument between the SEC and the Big East on which one's the second best conference.
Yeah.
But both of these conferences being the SEC and the Big East are stacked.
Yeah. I mean, it's a wild year for South because it is so unbelievably top heavy. Obviously, top 5, top 6 I'll throw in is kind of the dogs, but can we talk about the disappointing season for the Arkansas Razorbacks? I mean, the past 4, 5 years, however long Musselman has been the head coach of the Hogs, they've been consistently top 25, top 15, top 10 at some points, making deep runs into March. I think there's been Sweet 16, Elite Eights, bursts like every year he's been coached. Very very disappointing season for the Arkansas Razorbacks. They had a lot of transfers coming in expecting to be a valuable part of this Arkansas team, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. And that was how the Arkansas season played out. There's also a lot of off the court drama. We all know that story, all of it being BS, but that does affect a locker room, believe it or not. But just the sharp decline of Arkansas. I mean, people are calling for Muss to be fired in Fayetteville, which is wild, wild to me. But who knows? March is for Muss, so
maybe. I mean,
dude,
until a team is eliminated in their conference tournament, every team can make the dance.
Yeah.
So
that'd be a crazy run if Arkansas got in.
Arkansas fans, I could definitely. I mean, frustrating is a very good word because you can't. It's hard to be mad after all the success your program has had over the past few years. Frustrated. Yeah, that's the perfect word for it. If you're calling for Musselman's head, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
dog. I mean, I simply don't. Maybe sports aren't your thing, but yeah, it's a down year for Arkansas for sure. But if there's one thing about Musselman that we all know is that he can recruit in the portal.
Yeah,
and what's the quickest way to turn around a team? Through the portal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, you can never ever count Arkansas out. But we got 2 conferences left. Do you want to end it on the better of the 2 conferences or the bad or the worst of the 2 conferences?
Let's end it on the better.
End it on the better. So we'll go out west for the Pac-12. I believe our predictions took off 2 seconds for this one.
Yeah.
It's like you got Arizona, I got Arizona. Obviously we still got Arizona each, but looking at the bracket, one game that stands out to me, I'll say we got a lot of 6-3s that we're talking about. Possibility of Utah, Colorado, because that is a big time bubble match. Colorado in a better position than Utah, especially Utah losing to Oregon this past weekend. But Utah, Colorado, both with a chance to pick up a big time win for their resume.
Yeah, absolutely. game I'm looking at is at 8-9. That's gonna be an interesting matchup. USC has obviously been uh in the media cycle with of course Bronny James not living up to hype at all. I think he's averaging like 5 points. Um but and then we have the Huskies. They actually fired Mike Hopkins, their head coach, 3 days ago. So seeing how that pans out. But one guy the thing that intrigues me most about this matchup is one of the best college basketball players in the country going very unnoticed in the national media, Isaiah Collier, point guard for USC, one of the best college basketball players in the country right now. Just seeing what he can lead, where he can lead this USC team will be a story to watch in this one.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, we've had a couple sleeper teams to watch out for: Florida in the SEC, BYU in the Big 12. USC's got to be in the Pac-12 because obviously that 9-8 that 9-8 slot is tough because if you win, you got to go play number one.
Kind of brutal.
They played not too long ago, and Saturday to be exact, and USC beat Arizona by 13. So maybe some familiarity there that USC can parlay into another win and then possibly a deep run, because that's a team that is going to need nothing short of kind of a miracle to get into the field. And what better way than to go on a conference tournament run and maybe even win the damn thing.
Yeah.
So USC is the sleeper team there. Obviously, Washington State in that 2 slot. The least talked about good team in college basketball is Washington State. They can play.
Yeah.
But the Pac-12, not the best basketball conference out there, but a few teams that are on bubble watch, and of course Arizona, the big dog. But then we'll go out east for the Big East tournament. The bracket is set. Of course, number 1 UConn, the juggernauts of the conference. Anything stand out to you here? Because there is a big time. I mentioned Utah, Colorado as a bubble game. There is a big time bubble game in the quarterfinals, so in the second round between Seton Hall and St. John's, that has insanely large ramifications.
Yeah, that one is definitely one everyone's gonna want to watch. But this is gonna be chalky. But how can you not be excited for a potential matchup between UConn and Creighton? They played not too long ago. I think it was actually 2 episodes ago because we were talking about how dominant UConn had been all season, and they just got absolutely slaughtered by the Blue Jays. So that's obviously the matchup I'm looking forward to. I think we're gonna see it pending this Seton Hall St. John's, because I could see them making a shocking upset over UConn, but it might be chalky.
Yeah, I mean, both of us picked UConn to win, right? Especially with Marquette without Tyler Cole, like it just really hurts kind of the top teams in this conference. Obviously, specifically Marquette, but the top teams as a whole. When you look at the Big East, Seton Hall, if they beat St. John's, Seton Hall's beaten UConn already this year. I mean, it was all the way back in like either January or maybe even December, but still, they've beaten them before this season, and we all know March anything can happen. St. John's, as I just said, anything can happen. For the upset against UConn, I think Seton Hall needs to win that game, and then potential of UConn and Creighton. That's the popcorn. Get your popcorn ready type game.
Yeah,
maybe Marquette can put together a run without Kolek. Who knows? But yeah, I just think specifically in that quarterfinals, Seton Hall and St. John's is must see basketball, specifically for anyone who's on the bubble and watching teams that are around the bubble. But that kind of wraps it up for our conference tournament talk. I do have one more point to wrap up the episode, Sam, because I think we're in March, we're in conference tournament time, shortly we will be in March Madness. we need to stop calling teams that have the number 1 seed in the conference tournament, calling them regular season champions.
Yes.
Because guess what? That is not a championship. And I it really, really pisses me off. I understand it can be an old man take. It can be, it could be a grumpy old man yells at cloud take. But my God, like, each conference has one champion per year, and that is the team that wins the tournament.
Yeah.
You play the regular season to get a good seed in the tournament. That is how sports have worked for all of ever, always. And teams that are, you can celebrate, being the number 1 seed. I'm fine if you rush the court for it. Fine, celebrate, have your fun. But you got people pointing at rings, like ring me.
Yeah.
You've got all the merch that says like regular season champions. That is not a championship. Stop talking as if it is a championship. If there's a tournament for it, then the number 1 seed did not win anything. Stop calling it a championship. That is one of my bigger pet peeves during March.
Yeah, absolutely. 1000% agree. It's weird. It shouldn't be done. The real champs are whoever comes out of the conference tourney. And we're going to unravel a lot of it this upcoming week. Obviously, episode drops Thursday, so some of our takes could be completely wrong, but enjoy it. I mean, it's the best, man. And then we got Selection Sunday. We get a bracket special episode coming out next week. So, I mean, it's the best, man.
Listen to the podcast in the past, you'll know what next week's episode entails. But by the time you're listening to this, 1 week, 7 days until the first round tips off. This is basketball, not football, but so the first round tips off, and we could not be more excited, as we've said, for months and months and months. Now, really, since the end of the Super Bowl, we've been talking about it nonstop. But that's just what we do. But that's going to wrap it up for episode 123. The last episode without a bracket. Cannot be more excited. So excited for next week's episode with the bracket. Make sure you follow the podcast on X, TikTok, and Instagram at crunchtime_pod, and subscribe and like on YouTube, Crunch Time with the N326 duo. The clock has run out on this episode, and we'll see you in the next one on Crunch Time.